Welcome to an episode of Inner Work Guides, Alchemical Gnosis, Yoga of the West. I'm your host, John H. Reed III. Let's get to it. I'm calling this episode Then There Were Three. In the last episode entitled About That Seeming Extension, I spoke about the pregnant emptiness or unity creating a seeming extension and motion agitated into light. I said through an act of will, the one reflected on itself and knew itself fully in all its varied aspects, and that refraction gave birth to the potentialities stored within the pregnant emptiness or possible within the pregnant emptiness. Not unlike the possibilities of numbers, figures, drawings that were possible in using the ink in the inkwell in the example from the last episode. And so this recognition of self and the extension of a seeming separateness would have collapsed immediately back into unity without the ability to circumscribe itself. I think it would be better to describe that and say that it would diffuse itself back into unity without the ability to circumscribe itself. So, whereas the first pole of the seeming extension allowed for the refraction of the one into the archetypes as shown by the zodiac through motion agitated into light, the second pole of the seeming extension acts as a container and allows for fully exploring any potential within the archetype. The Golden Chain of Homer states, when collected in a sufficient quantity and violently agitated, it is manifested into a burning fire. This continues burning as long as it is agitated and has a fit subject to act upon. When that fails, it returns to its first state or tranquil universality. In this third state, it is visible, hot, or burning, and becomes somewhat material as it occupies room or space while in this state. In the paragraph above, the writer of the Golden Chain of Homer states that when this ubiquitous sentience is concentrated enough, a fire is produced that emanates and houses itself in physical appearance. The form occupying room or space will continue as long as it remains a fit subject to act upon. When that is no longer possible, the ubiquitous sentience returns to its tranquil universality. Just a quick side note, when the author uses the word fire, you should not just see this as flames produced via the combustion of a material thing. By analogy, you can think that all things in the universe, both subtle and dense, emit electromagnetic radiation. And radiation is simply energy being emitted or transmitted in the form of waves or particles. What we're speaking about is something that's even finer still than electromagnetic, but at least you have a concept to utilize in your mind to start trying to understand what the author of the Golden Chain of Homer is talking about. He's talking about the fire the author writes about is not necessarily a physical flames, though it can be. It's more to the point about that which lies at the center of all things. The secret fire that forms the perfect balance of the elements. It allows for the formation of the quintessence, the seat where the arcanum resides, the place where unity, in a sense, intrudes or thrusts into itself as it becomes somewhat material, as the text states. That interplay of emanation and experience is the reason for existence, be it physical or immaterial. It comes into being to accomplish a task, seeks various ways to achieve that task, and, in so doing, gains understanding about itself. When it has reached its end, it dissolves back into its origin. Without this vital counter-circumscription to the expansive nature of will, barely anything would be experienced in the universe, as it would be like a person who is full of ideas but unable to do anything. The emanation experience cycle is like a bunch of unit tests carried out by all species members, their individual experience commingled upon their dissolution to be added to the storehouse of knowledge and understanding. The third emanation of the one is responsible for the full exploration of polarity within any expression of the one, and the reintegration of that experience into the collective unconscious. All this interplay and commingling of potentiality in a circumscribed space is like the simmering of a soup and allows for the frictions and the fermentation of moist things. Or put more modernly, it allows for all the permutations that could be lawfully expressed by any seed's form in its archetypal blueprint. In my first book, The Minor Opus, also known as John Reed's Course on Practical Alchemy, I wrote back in 1992 that alchemy is the search for the quintessence. It's all about isolating the vital force of life itself, isolating it so that it can be condensed, purified, and manipulated to conform with the artist's will. Alchemy, in short, is the art of evolution. And that, to me, is the whole reason for going into studying alchemy, is to seek to understand natural processes and the workings of the divine mind. Seeking to understand that, I've talked to a lot of people and folk try to say that we know so much more today than what the ancients knew. They didn't have a periodic table, all kinds of things that we know today they didn't know. And that's true. But on the same hand, there were a lot of things that they did that we can't do or have trouble reproducing in this modern age. And so we shouldn't just offhandedly dismiss studying alchemy on its terms. If you shortchange alchemy by not seeking to understand it on its terms, rather trying to force it to be interpreted from a modern perspective, trying to make alchemy conform to modern science's tenets, I think you're always going to fail. The ancients had a different way of looking at things and understanding things. And we see, when you hear the word element, you think of discrete things, discrete units, like the elements of the periodic table. For the alchemists, the elements were permeable. They mutated from one into another. It was more about states of mind that precipitated states of matter. And so, I'm not saying that I'm against modern science. Believe me, that's not the case. It's modern science that is allowing, at last count, people to listen to me in 20 different countries. I'm just saying that there's more than one way to look at a thing and seek understanding about that thing. And so rather than saying I'm, going to use genetics or quantum mechanics or whatever to understand alchemy, I think you're just doing yourself a disservice. I saw something the other day that read 6 plus 3 equals 9. But so do 5 plus 4. So, nature just provides many paths to an answer. And if you're going to do alchemy, then you need to seek to understand it and allow nature to lead you with the central understanding that because the one resides at the center of everything, you don't really need, you don't need any foreign substance introduced into your work. Now, yeah, there are agreed upon shortcuts and things that people can do for expediency. But the crux of the matter is this. You have to understand how to bring about the true depth of your subject matter. And if you can't get it to decomposed in a controlled manner, you don't have the first key to alchemy. Okay, next week we start the Sustainable Transmutations series. Thank you for listening to this episode of Inner Work Guide's Alchemical Gnosis, Yoga of the West. Don't forget to subscribe. Contact me by writing to theinnerworkguide@gmail.com. Go to my website, innerwork.guide. Create an account to get on the mailing list, read the blog and listen to the podcast. Click on the donate button to support my work.